All right, I'm adult. Sorry, I've had a rough morning already. The monkey got out. So this may be a bit of a short live because I got to go catch our pet monkey. And she's running around on top of the cage right now. So she'll be all right. So anyway, hey, everybody. Sorry about that. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I got a great show for you. And you're going to be glad you watched. Now, make sure you hit the like button. Let me know where you're coming in from. As you know, I like to see those locations in the comments, and it does help the algorithm as well. So here's the topic for today. 2 people are dead in Washington, D.C. simply because they were Jewish. They weren't soldiers or politicians. They weren't even activists. They were just 2 young lovers walking out of the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., when a man 30 years old walked up, pulled a gun, and ended their lives, literally executed them in the street. He shouted, "Free Palestine," as he did it. And he didn't just shoot him once, he actually ran her down as she was crawling away and finished her off. Now, when he was arrested, he said he did it for Gaza. That was his message. That was his whole justification. Did it for Gaza. Now, we're going to take a deeper dive and look at what motivates extremists like this to commit these heinous acts of terror. And we're going to ask what we can do about it. But first, we got to pay the bills. So let's talk about our sponsor, which is the wellness company. RFK Jr. just released a bombshell report on the state of health in America. And the findings are deeply concerning. Rising chronic disease, declining energy, over medication of the whole population. We ought to do a whole podcast just on that sometime. I think that'd be an interesting podcast. But he's not just sounding the alarm. RFK is trying to lead by example and stay healthy himself. He's known for his sharp mind and kind of relentless energy on the campaign trail. So RFK Jr. has turned to Methylene Blue to stay focused and energized and mentally resilient. It's part of his own strategy for peak performance. And now you can have the same benefits with Recharge from the wellness company. The doctor formulated supplement is the first to combine 2 ingredients, methylene blue and something called urolithin A, which is found in like walnuts and berries and things like that. And it creates a powerful synergy that optimizes your mitochondrial function and boosts your energy and sharpens your cognitive performance. So methylene blue crosses the blood-brain barrier, try saying that 10 times fast, to fuel your brain with ATP, which is really the true energy source for your cells. That's what your cells use to do everything. Now, while acting as it acts as a potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory as well to help slow aging and protect your health at the cellular level. So if you're looking for a real edge mentally and physically, Recharge delivers. You get 10% off plus free shipping when you go to twc.health/hotzone and use code HOTZONE. All right, now let's get back to today's video. Their names were Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lachinsky. Now, one was from Kansas, one was from Jerusalem. Both of them were just doing their jobs. You know, they were staffers at the embassy. Both had families and dreams and a future together planned. Yaron was about to propose to her next week in Jerusalem. And now that's all gone. Because one guy decided that spilling innocent blood would somehow bring justice. And let me tell you something chilling. This wasn't random. It wasn't senseless in his mind, at least. It was calculated, and it was ideologically driven, and it was encouraged by mainstream media reporting on other senseless killings like this. Now, Sarah was proudly Jewish. She's from Kansas, a peacemaker, She had her bat mitzvah in Israel, and she worked to build bridges between Jews and Arabs. That was kind of her thing. Yaron was actually a Messianic Jew. He was a follower of Jesus. And he was also a man of reconciliation and was known for his kindness and courage. And somebody decided that their faith and identity made them worthy of death. Maybe not even that. Maybe it was just, he just wanted to kill somebody that was coming out of that Jewish museum. So that could have been you or me. So how does this all happen? How do you go from, like a political disagreement to outright dehumanization? How do you pull the trigger in the name of justice when something is so unjust? Well, we're watching this unfold more and more, not just in the Middle East, but here in America and in Europe. The rise of ideologically motivated violence isn't a random crime. It's not mental illness. It's a belief system that tells people it's righteous to kill for the cause. Now, we've seen it on the far right, and we've seen it on the far left, and we've seen it under the form of religious extremism, and we've seen it from incel losers and Antifa radicals, and even right-wing whack jobs. But why? That's the question. Why do people feel like attacking a random bystander is worth throwing their life away just to make a point? It doesn't make any logical sense. And that's exactly what makes it so terrifying. But when we zoom out and we look at the broader pattern, we can start to see how societies drift into this madness. So here's a breakdown of the cultural, psychological, and ideological steps that often lead to somebody feeling entitled or even obligated to commit violence against innocent strangers. Ideological possession is when an ideology becomes more than a belief system, when it becomes somebody's identity. It doesn't just influence their behavior, it reprograms their conscience. That's what we mean when you say ideological possession. Somebody's just possessed by their ideology. And it's not just that somebody holds a strong opinion, it's that those opinions start to hold them. The ideology becomes the lens through which everything is interpreted, every person categorized, every event politicized. Suddenly, the world's reduced to a simplistic binary: oppressed versus oppressor, good versus evil, my tribe versus the enemy, the other. And anything, absolutely anything, can be rationalized in service of the cause. Lying, violence, betrayal, destruction, war in Ukraine, October 7th, it's all justified as long as it's directed at the people who stand on the wrong side of this imaginary moral divide. That's how you get a man who doesn't see Sarah Milgram as a human being. He sees a symbol, a placeholder for a grievance. He sees Zionism or colonialism or, I don't know, whatever phantom enemy his echo chamber has conjured up. And then he acts out of a fantasy of revenge on that symbol. He doesn't kill Sarah the person, he kills Sarah the concept. And in his mind, that makes it not wrong, but noble. Now, we've seen this in every violent ideology, from jihadist terrorism to militant white supremacy to revolutionary Marxism. When your cause becomes your God, morality bends to serve it. Your enemies stop being people. They're just obstacles at that point. They're a faceless crowd in your narrative of resistance. Now, I would venture to say that we've all felt this at one time or another. I know I have. You get arguing with somebody online and you just like can't let it go. My wife's going, "Hey, are you coming to bed?" And I'm like, "No, there's somebody wrong on the internet. I got to fix this." You know, and we end up saying things to one another online that we would never think to say to somebody to their face because it just isn't proper. It's not. It's not. It's more than personal. It's ideological at that point, and they have become the faceless other in your narrative of resistance. So ideological possession is seductive because it kind of gives your life a purpose. It offers belonging and clarity and a moral certainty in a confusing world, but it also kills that empathy. And when empathy dies, then brutality becomes thinkable. Dehumanization, before you can pull the trigger or swing the knife, you first have to convince yourself that the target isn't fully human. So that's what they do. They dehumanize their enemy. This process is gradual or rapid, doesn't matter. It starts with words. You don't call someone a person, you call them a problem. You don't argue against, a policy or a political disagreement. You attack the people who support it. And over time, that language starts to escalate. You don't debate Jews, you resist Zionists. You don't disagree with conservatives, you go punch Nazis. You don't protest police, you target the pigs. Memes and slogans and hashtags, they all contribute to this. It's a kind of, mental erosion. They chip away at your humanity and the humanity of your perceived enemies until the only thing left is like a caricature. You're not arguing with a person, you're arguing with a caricature of that person. You're talking past each other, not to each other. And that caricature becomes a threat, a pest. It needs to be eradicated. And when someone's no longer seen as human, then the moral guardrails just disappear. Killing them isn't wrong, it's justice. It's necessary, it's heroic. And we've seen this kind of language throughout history. The Hutus called Tutsis cockroaches. The Nazis called Jews rats. The Khmer Rouge called their victims parasites. And today we hear it in online forums and political rallies and chants on college campuses. It's the same playbook. Dehumanization is now how otherwise normal people become capable of horrific acts. It doesn't require psychology, and you don't have to be a psychopath to engage in it. It just requires enough propaganda and a vacuum where moral truth used to be. Isolation and radicalization are the next thing. Almost every mass shooter or ideological attack, whatever, shares one common trait. They were isolated long before they became radicalized. They were socially disconnected. Talked a lot about this with the Incel movement. They felt unseen, unheard, unloved. In the case of Incels, they go months or even years without any meaningful touch in their lives. And this loneliness really provides like fertile soil for extremism. Because once somebody's isolated, they become vulnerable. They're vulnerable to narratives that make them feel more powerful than they really are, make them feel valuable and needed. Enter the internet. Algorithms aren't just feeding us content on YouTube anymore. They're now, shaping our identities in a way that we never had to deal with before. Echo chambers amplify our grievances. They reward our outrage. They connect us not to truth, but to tribalism. And this is one of the reasons why I get so much flack for criticizing President Trump when I feel like he did something wrong. Is I want to tell the truth. And I like President Trump, but I'm not going to call myself a sycophant or look, if my tribe is wrong, I need to have the courage of my convictions to say that they're wrong. Now, these isolated young men, the incels that I'm talking about, because most of them are men, of course, they spend years soaking up that anger and they latch on to causes that give them purpose. And so that might be Gaza, that might be Trump, that might be whatever. And soon their online identities start to bleed into real life. They're no longer just anonymous screen names, they're soldiers for the cause. They imagine the day that they'll finally be noticed for once, when the world will know their name. That's why I think it's so important that media outlets don't say the name of these people. Violence becomes their way of breaking the silence. The illusion of heroism is the next point I want to make. This is one of the most tragic elements of radical violence. The attacker doesn't see himself as the villain. He sees himself as the hero. He's not a killer. He's a martyr. He's not a criminal, but a freedom fighter. Not a terrorist. He's a revolutionary. Look, whatever delusion he wants to feed, when they chant slogans like "by any means necessary" or "from the river to the sea" or even "free Palestine," they mean it, and they mean it in a very genocidal way. When they celebrate martyrs, they're glorifying murderers. The fantasy is kind of intoxicating. You're not alone anymore. You're not a failure. You're not a loser. You're a warrior, and your act of violence against your perceived enemy isn't evil. It's meaningful. Well, it's a lie, but it's a powerful one. And that's why we see these murderers smiling in their mugshots, writing these ridiculous manifestos, broadcasting their attacks. They want their act to echo throughout the society. They want to go viral. They want to change the world in their own kind of sick way. But what they don't understand is that it doesn't. It doesn't change the world. It just leaves mothers screaming and children without parents. Now, last but not least is this culture of moral relativism that we see all throughout America. Here's where it all collapses. When a society no longer believes in truth, then really anything can be justified. If there's no God, there's no fixed moral law, no right and wrong, then what's left? Just power. And once power becomes the only currency, then whoever hits hardest wins. Morality becomes whatever the loudest voice says it is. Violence becomes negotiation. This is exactly what we see in the war in Ukraine right now. Truth ends up becoming tribal. And this is why we so badly need an objective standard of truth. Outside ourselves, truth is not opinion. It's not a flavor of ice cream that you get to choose. It's like penicillin. It's life or death. Moral relativism is poison. It tells people that your truth is all that matters. You get to choose your own truth, and that your feelings outweigh facts, that offense equals oppression, and the strongest emotion wins. But if everybody creates their own moral universe, then there's no shared foundation for justice and peace or reconciliation. There's only friction. And that's how you get to where we are today. To a world where someone can kill strangers and call it justice. To a society where people celebrate murder if the victim had the wrong bumper sticker or the wrong skin color or the wrong passport. To a generation that believes that ideology makes them immune to evil, and yet these acts of evil don't need to make sense to us. They just need to make sense to them, to the killer. That's why clarity and courage are essential for us. Because if we don't draw clear lines between good and evil and right and wrong, then those lines get redrawn in blood. Folks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and go to chuckholton.com for my books and movies, documentaries, lots of extra stuff. And by the way, we're releasing my newest documentary just in time for Memorial Day today. So it's about the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima. I got the distinct honor to go interview several of the survivors of the battle. And thank you very much for being here, Dwayne. Appreciate it. And I think it's really important to hear them tell their stories. It was incredibly emotional for them and for me, much more than I thought it would be. 80 years later, they were recounting to me the stories of what happened like it was yesterday, and they were doing it through tears. It was very emotionally draining, to say the least. And so you won't want to miss it. The documentary will be available on YouTube at some point, but it's available right now or today for paying supporters over at my locals page. So toss me a few bucks and you get early access. So anyway, back to this shooting in Washington, D.C. This is how you get a man with a pistol shooting two peace-loving young Jews and telling himself he's the good guy. You know, if he had walked up to those two and said, hey, excuse me, could I borrow $1? Or could I make a phone call on your phone? Or, could you help me with directions? That couple would have gladly helped that guy. But instead, he walked up and ended their lives. What if I told you this is part of something bigger? What if I told you the world we live in now is getting more dangerous, not just because of ideology, weapons, or crime, but because of what's happening in people's minds? Because this isn't just about anti-Semitism or Islamism or racism or politics. It's become a global trend, radicalization of the ordinary, the quiet normalization of violence to the point where it doesn't even make the news hardly. If you want to see what it looks like when this really takes root, let's go look at an example, the nation of Germany. Now, Germany's not a war zone. It's a highly developed country with a very strong economy and incredibly organized people. Very big rule followers over there. But today it's experiencing a wave of violence that really should alarm every single one of us. In 2023, so year before last, Germany had more than 14,000 violent knife attacks. That's 50 to 60 stabbings every day. Let that sink in. We're not talking about robberies or scuffles or something. We're talking about people being randomly attacked in department stores, at Christmas festivals, on public transit, in the streets. And it isn't just with knives. In the past 5 years, Germany's had many deadly vehicle ramming attacks. Some of them have been motivated by jihadist ideology, and some of them are just mental illness. In one case I know of, it was a far-right anti-Islamist who plowed into a Christmas market, killed 6 people, wounded nearly 300, all from one car. Now, it's not easy to get a gun in Germany. Otherwise, you'd probably see higher gun violence. But instead, people just choose the weapons they have at hand. And these aren't isolated incidents. They're not always tied to terrorism, although often the perpetrators are immigrants, which is a whole topic all its own. And I've done entire documentaries on that. We could do more podcasts about that if you want. Sometimes it's ideology, sometimes it's just rage, sometimes it's mental illness, but the results are the same. Ordinary people getting mowed down in public, and a government that really doesn't know how to stop it and doesn't see that their political policies are actually causing it. This is what boggles my mind. Now, some people just think the best way to make a point and let everybody know how you feel about whatever issue bothers you today is to just randomly kill a bunch of innocent people who have nothing to do with what you're on about. This is why self-defense is so important. But in Germany, you're not allowed to defend yourself. The legal system is actively hostile to self-defense. If somebody comes at you with a knife and you fight back with a tool that isn't proportional, whatever the heck that means, you could be the one that goes to jail. If you harm your attacker trying to get away from him, you could go to jail. It is legally prohibited for you to protect yourself. In fact, there are cases where the attacker walked free when the victim was prosecuted. This is the moral inversion that we're seeing all across the world. And a nation that treats self-protection as a crime and allows attackers to flourish in the gray areas of society and asylum law and moral relativism, that's a society that's in trouble. Now, let me hit you with the part that most Americans don't know. As bad as Germany sounds right now, 50 to 60 knife attacks every day, America's far worse. Germany's knife violence per capita is about 108 incidents per million people. In the United States, take a guess where that number is. It's over 400 per million, nearly 4 times the rate of knife assaults happening here compared to Germany. America has 100,000 knife attacks each year in the United States. We just don't hear about it. Why? Well, I guess because here it's background noise. We've learned to kind of live with it. You scroll right past it. Oh, another knife attack, whatever. File it under urban crime and move on. But it's not getting better. We've had knife rampages on the Vegas Strip. A man stabbed 4 students to death in Idaho. We've even seen vehicle attacks like they see in Germany. We had that Christmas parade up in Wisconsin, I think it was. We've seen rammings at labor protests and even at the US Capitol. So we're not immune. We're not safer here in America. In fact, we're more vulnerable because at least in Germany, the public still gets shocked and outraged. Here, we just kind of shrug. But this is the death of civilization that I wrote about in my book. That's happening all around us in real time. But here's the silver lining for Americans. We're not helpless. Hey, thank you, PC. Very kind of you. Unlike Germany, we still have the right to defend ourselves, at least in most places. Washington, D.C. is a notable exception. We can still carry pepper spray. We can still carry tools that give us a fighting chance, and we should. Because making ourselves more vulnerable does not make us more virtuous. It makes us victims. So let me speak plainly here. If you care about your family, learn to use a tourniquet. You might be the first responder in a mass casualty event. You never know. You might be the only one who can stop the bleeding. Carry a can of pepper spray with you. It's amazing how you can discourage shenanigans with a little spicy treat. Have it with you when you're walking to your car, walking your dog, when you're at the park or going to the grocery store. Thank you, Corey. Very kind of you. Pepper spray is cheap and legal and effective in almost everywhere. And if you're able and you're trained and the law allows it, then carry more. Carry other tools that you can use to make the world around you a safer place. Because this isn't theoretical anymore. It's happening. And the next victim could be somebody you love. Now I want to take this to a deeper level as we wrap this up, because in the face of all this chaos and all this ideology-driven bloodshed, there's one belief system that doesn't lead to hatred and death. There's one worldview that doesn't radicalize people into killers. It transforms them into peacemakers, and that's Christianity. I'm not talking about cultural Christianity. I'm not talking about the watered down vote getting bumper sticker hua hua, version. I'm not talking about the forced conversions of the Middle Ages. I'm talking about Jesus-centered biblical Christianity, the gospel, the real thing, the inconvenient, cross-bearing, world upside down turning call of Jesus Christ. Christianity isn't violent. It isn't even just merely peaceful. Christianity is love, radically loving. Christ didn't kill for his followers. He didn't command us to wage holy war on the infidel. He went out and died for the infidel and for you and me. He didn't say, take up your sword. He said, take up your cross. He said, put your sword away. He didn't say, destroy your enemies. He said, forgive them. Thank you. Oh, I missed Lady Trucker. Was that who that was? Thank you. He didn't say your enemies are people who don't look like you. He said, love one another. And when you truly follow him, when you build your identity around him, not a cause or a slogan or a party, you don't end up at violence. You end up at mercy. You end up at sacrifice and humility and compassion. That is the difference, people. The jackwagon who killed Sarah and Yaron believed vengeance was against innocence, and it made him righteous. But Yaron believed in a savior who said, blessed are the peacemakers. And although Sarah wasn't a Christian, she lived a life that embodied that same spirit. Bridge building, not bridge burning. And that's what we need more of today. Because if we don't draw clear lines between justice and revenge, between truth and propaganda out there, then those lines will get redrawn in blood, like I said before. So speak the truth. Don't be afraid. Call evil by its name. Reject the lie that all belief systems are equally valid. They're not. Some ideas bring life. Others bring death. You want to know what's good and what's evil? Good leads to life and flourishing. Anything that leads to life and flourishing is good. Anything that leads to death and suffering is evil. And the only real peace comes through love. And love has a name. His name is Jesus. So let's be people who live like that's actually true. Let's be the ones who carry light into the darkest places, not just mourn the victims. Let's honor them by standing for truth and refusing to let the world go numb. Folks, I'm going to have to run. I know it's a short live today, but my monkey is still out. I got to go catch her and put her back. But thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all of you. I hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast, and hope you will make sure that you're going over to chuckholton.com to see our new documentary over there as well.